part in this event. Thank you for your warm welcome. I know that your focus has been on the role of information technology in education, and I want to congratulate the Minister for being a champion of the use of digital technology in support of development and in support of learning, and we were having just a very quick conversation about that then. I also want to thank Belgium for being a generous contributor and valued member of the Global Partnership for Education. We do very much welcome your involvement. It's been such a strong partnership over time. And it is great to feel your ongoing support for us as the only global fund dedicated to ensuring that every child in developing countries receives a quality basic education. The last time I was here in Brussels, it was to deliver the Kapuczynski Development Lecture and to receive an honorary doctorate from the Free University of Brussels. So I remember that last visit very well indeed and treasure that honorary doctorate. I want to repeat what I said when I gave that lecture and received that honorary doctorate to that audience. We are all here in this room today because everyone in this room had the opportunity to get a good education. Education has played a transformative role in all of our lives. It's what has enabled us to fulfil our potential and engage fully in the world through our work, our interactions with others, and today that often means using technology. We live in fast-moving times, and since my last visit here, a lot has happened. We have just seen the National Front in France score its best ever election result, though thankfully it was not enough to take the presidency. We've seen the United Kingdom vote to leave the European Union, and of course we've seen President Trump elected in the United States. Democracies around the world are being roiled by new forces leading to unpredictable outcomes. These forces include rising inequality within nations, the reshaping of work by technology, digital disruption, and faster and more efficient transport. We're also feeling the impact of record numbers of people who have been forcibly displaced or who have fled great hardship. Among them are 21.3 million refugees, half of them under the age of 18. And as you know only too well here in Brussels, people live with the risk of terrorist actions, whether foreign or locally grown. Significantly, as all of this has happened, how we access information has entirely changed in this world. Now, it's entirely changed in ways that can empower us, but it's also enabled fake news to thrive and even real news to be reported in quicker and more hyped-up ways. All this means that politics is increasingly framed as a contest between those accepting of globalisation and people who benefit from it, and those who feel left behind. Against this backdrop of fragmented community sentiment, I want to discuss with you today why I think it's still possible for us to forge an important new political consensus around solving a global problem. And that problem is the global learning crisis, which today means that there are 263 million children of primary and secondary school who are not where they should be. Instead, they're out of school and they're out of hope. And there are 130 million more children who can barely read or write, even though they are attending primary school. Without immediate and drastic action to invest more in education, over half of the world's upcoming youth generation, 825 million of the 1.6 billion young people who will be alive in 2030, will simply not be equipped to work and thrive in this century. The good jobs of tomorrow will require higher skill levels than today, given it's estimated 2 billion jobs will be lost to technology by 2050. But almost every child in the poorest countries will have little opportunity to progress into a world of work that demands higher and higher levels of skill. Even in middle-income countries, less than half of children will acquire minimum secondary level skills. Condemning hundreds of millions of children to a dismal future, regardless of their abilities, is a huge injustice. It is also a violation of basic human rights, as well as posing significant risks. Inequality and joblessness, especially among young people, have been cited for several years as top global risk factors by the World Economic Forum. The Mo Ibrahim Foundation recently published a report called Africa at a Tipping Point, which provides a clear analysis of the implications of the continent's rapidly growing youth population. The warning of that report is stark. Africa could reap a demographic dividend from the energy and talent of its young people, or it could fail to educate them, and as a result see significant economic losses, armed conflict, brain drain, and social and political unrest. The benefits of investing in education are clear. Individual earnings rise by about 10% for each individual year of schooling a child receives. And if every child in low-income countries was able to complete secondary school by 2030, income per capita would increase by 75%. So, it is saddening and gallingly irrational to see that aid to education from the world's richest nations dropped from 13% of total aid in 2002 to 10% in 2014. We must reverse this trend and find new ways to invest in education, and we have to do it now. Technology can and should be part of the solution to this learning crisis. If it is well tailored to local contexts and integrated into the curriculum, information technology can provide additional, powerful reasons for teacher development and student learning, powerful reasons to change and powerful new resources to make that change happen. I want to emphasise that digital technology cannot replace well-trained, qualified teachers, but it can amplify their efforts. And it can, as a result, extend and deepen students' learning. To be effective, the use of ICT must be built into strong education systems, and the benefits of the digital revolution must be equally spread. If it's not, the digital revolution has the potential to increase inequalities and exclusion rather than combat them. But if we invest in education to build strong, inclusive education systems, we can reduce gaps and inequalities. We can also improve the peace and stability of societies. Higher levels of schooling, provided opportunities to learn are equitably shared, can significantly cut the risk of conflict. We know that a major motivating factor for Syrian families seeking refuge in Europe and elsewhere is access to education for their children. So, if we want to reduce armed conflict and stem migration flows, equitable access to quality education is essential. It's also very clear that education improves health outcomes. Better educated populations make healthier choices for themselves and their families. We know education is a preventative factor in the spread of HIV, especially for girls. An educated mother will marry and have her children later in life. She will be far more likely to vaccinate her children and to have them sleep under mosquito nets to prevent malaria. And of course, there are huge economic benefits to be gained from having women enter the workforce and having a nation utilise the talents and potential of the whole population. As these outcomes demonstrate, education is not only a good investment, it's the clearest pathway for nations to leave poverty and aid dependence behind. Just as the case for education has never been stronger, the best ways to make a difference have never been clearer. I can confidently say to you that the Global Partnership for Education, which I'm honoured to chair, is better now at the complex work of investing in and strengthening education outcomes in developing countries than it has ever been before. With more than a decade's experience and several years of organisational reform behind us, we know what makes all the difference. We know that that big difference is made by whether or not there is a robust national plan to guide the development of strong education systems. Our first step in developing such a strong plan is to work with a developing country government and analyse the existing education sector, determine the scale of need and bring everyone into a single planning process, including donors, local civil society, think tanks, teachers and private sector philanthropists. This process leads to the generation of a transparent, high-quality plan, but it also must meet other criteria. In order to be approved and funded, our partner countries must include a finance proposal to systematically collect data and report learning results. Very significantly, they must also step up their own expenditure to education towards 20% of national budgets. Here, I want to emphasise that though we urgently need to scale up aid for education, it is domestic funding that is and will continue to be the source of the vast majority of the funds. As a result of our focus on driving domestic investment, between 2002 and 2013, GPE partner countries increased their education budgets from 15.2 to 16.6% of total government expenditure, more than 3 times the average increase in all low and middle income countries. Not only is GPE funding linked to domestic spending requirements, it is also results-based. 30% of GPE's main education grant to a country is linked to the achievement of agreed results in equity, efficiency and learning. It's not just a matter of deploying more dollars or euros to pay more teachers or build more schools or even purchase more technology, but of ensuring accountability and focusing on results right through the education system. All this patient, system-strengthening work matters because of the foundational role of education in the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. Indeed, none of the 17 UN-agreed global goals can be achieved without creating inclusive, quality education in developing countries. But to do so, we urgently need more resources. The International Commission on Educational Opportunity, on which I served, has recommended that GPE be scaled up to resource levels of $2 billion a year by 2020 and $4 billion a year by 2030. To get to this goal, GPE is campaigning right now for funding of $3.1 billion from existing and new donors for its upcoming replenishment. In the next 3 years, from 2018 to 2020, this would enable GPE to better support learning and equity outcomes in 89 countries, which are home to 78% of the world's out-of-school children. We would be able to put more than 25 million children through primary and lower secondary school, including almost 15 million in countries affected by fragility or conflict. But donors must step up, traditional donors, new donors, philanthropists. We know it makes sense to invest in education, but global leaders will find it much easier to do so if their citizens support that investment too. We need to make sure that governments see that education is a priority, that it is at least as important as other areas of focus like infrastructure and defence. I ask you today to support GPE's campaign by ensuring that your government and your minister, who's here today, but also the Prime Minister, knows that you are interested in solving the learning crisis. I'm sure that I can rely on those in this room to be adding their voice to the campaign for education generally and for GPE's replenishment in particular. And given today you've been talking about new technology, I do want to say to all the digital natives in the room out there, you can always show your support on social media. You can get out there tweeting. I do it myself using the hashtag #FundEducation, though I'd have to say I'm not as good at it as some others, and I don't tend to do it in the middle of the night. I leave that to others as well. But these are the many ways in which we can make a difference to the world that we share by acting together for the global right to education, knowing that it's the best way of shaping our shared future. I thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Julia, for sharing these very interesting thoughts and to remind us about what's really at stake when we're talking about education. Well, now it's time for the last speaker of today's conference. We are very happy that we can welcome him already for the second time at an education conference. I guess he really likes us. As he's the Minister of Development Cooperation and the Digital Agenda, we know that this year's theme of the conference is very close to his heart. So, without further ado, I introduce you to Minister Alexander de Croo.
Good afternoon, and first of all, I'd like to thank all of you to attend this conference, and especially very grateful, Mrs. Gillard, to have you here in Brussels. You've explained how you're actually somewhat the rabbit coming in front of the US President, because you're here this week, and next week we'll have the US President here, and you were in Israel, and more or less the same has happened. And it seems it will continue that way. We will give him the same warm welcome as we have been giving you. Obviously, as said in the introduction, very happy to talk about education, a topic which has always been very close to my heart. A topic which in Belgium, in our very complex structure, is not a federal topic, it's a regional topic. So in principle it is something which has been left to other ministers. But fortunately in the development world we do invest a lot in education, and actually it is a part where the regions have decided that it's perfectly okay for the federal minister to act, especially since we put the money on the table. That makes it obviously a bit easier to leave it to us. But of course the link to digital is I think an important one. We do live in digital times. I think that's quite clear. We live in digital times here, but more and more we live in digital times around the world. And this digital revolution is changing our lives. It is changing the way we look at our future, and very often in the Western world my feeling is that more and more people look at this digital future with some fear, with some doubts on what it will mean, and I think these doubts are wrong. I do not believe the stories that say that half of the jobs will disappear and that we need an unconditional basic income and that is the only solution. I do not think it will go in that direction. But I'm definitely even more optimistic about the fact that if we look at the developing world, the digital revolution is really seen as an opportunity, and is really being embraced by the actors that can make change happen in the developing world. And I think especially there it has an incredible opportunity for leapfrogging, and we already see that happening now. If we look at, for example, mobile payments, the place in the world where the edges development is taking place, it's not here, it's not in the United States, it's in Bangladesh, it's in Kenya, and so on. That's a great thing. And it is taking place there because finally it is a system which can be adapted to the real needs of the local population. Here it seems that we're a bit afraid of that. The same happens in distant healthcare. Distant healthcare is not really taking place here because we see all the risks. Today in Rwanda and Tanzania, they obviously see the opportunity of that, and the real edge of development is taking place there. Which I think is a great thing, because it means that for the first time, globalization is really realizing its full potential. If we're really fair about it, globalization up to now was a bit of a one-way street. It was the Western world creating something and the rest of the world just consuming it. We see that is changing. We are finally becoming a multipolar world where things are being created all over the world and are being exchanged in a truly global way. For me, that is the real benefit of globalization, and I'm so happy to see that it is finally realizing its full potential. And I think that in education, we have the same opportunity. You have the same opportunity of being able to develop something a bit more based on a blank sheet compared to what we have here, and the opportunity to develop solutions that are really suited to the needs in our partner countries. And that is the opportunity which I obviously like to talk about. Is there also a threat? Yes, I think there is also a threat about this. And throughout history, we've always seen that when there is an industrial or a technological revolution, in any case, there has always been kind of a parallel educational revolution. If we look at the industrialization start of the last century here in Western Europe, what was the educational component to it? Well, the educational component was sending everyone to primary and secondary school. Why did we do that? Well, because we needed the labor force, and sending people to school was corresponding to a certain demand. When we've had the industrial revolution in the 60s with microprocessors and so on, what was the educational component? Well, the educational component was sending as many kids as we could into higher education. Why was that? Well, because we need the brain power. We see that when there is a major technological breakthrough and the educational system is not following, that is the moment where there is a risk. That is the moment where you create different groups in population where a certain group is not following. And we are at such a moment. We are at a moment where education can use technology as a gigantic opportunity to be more adapted to the needs, to be more efficient, to be more tailor-made. That's one part of it. But the other part is also that if education is not following with what is happening in the rest of the world, you might have a risk of creating big differences within the population. And education has always had this force of giving kids the same opportunity. So that as a scene setter. Digital is a topic which is close to my heart, and most of the Belgians know that in the beginning the combination of development cooperation and digital agenda was seen as a bit of a political accident, where two portfolios had been put together. But quickly we saw it as an opportunity of integrating digital in our policy work, and we actually have been doing this already over the last years in a few educational projects. One of them is an e-learning project that we are organizing together with the Palestinian Authority, which is a very successful one, and one that has been rolled out over a broad scale of the population. We have another one which we have in the DRC, where we use a very simple SMS-based system just to see if the teacher is in the class, the kids are in the class, and just being able to track things. A third one is a project we have in Benin, where we are combining ICT education together with entrepreneurship, and that for me is the real promise that we have here, is trying to use technology happen to education what it has done in other parts of life. Digital has done one big thing: it has lowered the thresholds of access. It has lowered the threshold of access for consumers to services which used to be for a very small part of the population and are now opening up. But it especially lowered the thresholds for people who wanted to be an entrepreneur, who want to create something. It's never been easier than today to participate, to be an entrepreneur, to shape society in other ways than just doing it as a politician, which I still think is a very honorable thing to do, but it shouldn't be the only way of achieving that. And I think that in education it has exactly the same potential. A potential of opening up education to a much broader part of the population, but also an opportunity of lowering the threshold for people who want to be active in education. Education for me is not something that should be isolated to the school and the teachers. The school and the teachers will always play a very, very important role. But I don't think as a parent, and I definitely do not see it that way compared to my children. I do not think that education is something that we should completely outsource to the school and to the teachers. It is something where parents also have a very important role to play in. And I think that the digital revolution can only help us in playing that role where schools and parents start to be more complementary, one with the other. So very happy that we've had a day here discussing not about is digital going to play an important role in education, because I think we're convinced of that, but more on the question, how do we do it? Which are the models where we see this work? And I'm sure you've seen a few examples, and how can we integrate it in the policies that we are trying to develop, and how can we really do it in a partnership, not which is based on an old view of development cooperation where one is giving something to the other, but in a new view, which is how do we actually invest together in something and make this a long-run effort. Mrs. Gillard, obviously very happy to have you here another time in Brussels. We've met last year already. A lot of admiration for what you've been doing with the global partnership. I think the global partnership really has established itself as the authority related to education and development. And obviously very happy with the emphasis you've put on financing and financing education. Despite technological revolutions and so on, you still need some financing to be able to do things. But especially also on the emphasis that you've put on data collection, on innovation, and so on. When you do have data, when you create an environment for education, it makes the whole space a lot more attractive than it used to be. And you see that it is attracting new people, new interests, new organizations into the educational field. We can only be very happy with that. As you know, Belgium has been a partner of GPE for some time, and it is not a surprise that we will continue doing so. Otherwise, I don't think I would have had the opportunity to speak here. But we will continue our partnership with the global partnership for the next years, and for the period 2017 till 2020, we are committing 26 million euros in the global partnership, which is an effort which is comparable to a small country like Belgium. But besides the financing, obviously we're looking forward to engaging with you to look in our 14 partner countries where we can work together, where we can share experience, where our very vibrant civil society can engage with you and with the projects, and where we can really get things moving. I think this is a domain that touches on a variety of other domains. You might know that together with some other countries we have played a leading role in the She Decides initiative, which is trying to compensate some decision that has been taken related to sexual and reproductive health. And the linkages between sexual and reproductive health and education are actually very tight. One is very much linked with the other. And it is something that is really at the basis of everything. If our goal is by 2030 to eradicate poverty in the world, extreme poverty in the world completely, which I think is perfectly feasible, we will only do it if we also focus on the most vulnerable ones. And the most vulnerable ones today are very often women and girls. And if we want to give women and girls a real opportunity to make a choice in life, and that choice in life could be one where they say at the age of 12, I do not want to get married with someone who's 3 times as old as I do not want to have my first child at 12, and I do not want to have 7 children and not have the opportunity to go to school, but now I do want to go to school, get my own income, and not be in a situation of dependency. Then I think both are really linked one with the other. Very happy that Belgium is a supporter of both, a supporter of giving girls and women equal rights, but also making sure that we have sufficient investments in education to have an opportunity to get the best out of their potential. Would like to thank Educate for organizing this event. Thank all of you for the interest you have in this domain, and I'm quite sure that we will be continuing working together in this domain in the next years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think the two last speeches were an excellent way to end this year's conference of Educate. I would like to thank all presenters and facilitators who were bringing the best today to make this conference a success. And more in particular, I would also like to thank Maartje, who once more did a great job to organize this conference. Well, and I hope that next year we will see all of you again, probably at this venue, for the next edition of Educate's annual conference. And in the meantime, I would like to welcome you for a drink next door. Thank you.